Now one important thing I would like to show you is about the first property value pair which we had taken for the child object web checkbox. Now once we go to the object spy and we see the first property for the web checkbox, it is class name and the value is web checkbox. Now you have to remember guys that never use class name directly in your script, okay? Instead of class name we use my class, so just remove that. MIC class, this is used instead of class name because most of the time script doesn't work if we use class name. So both mean the same, only differences instead of using the class name you have to use my class, and rest everything will be the same. Now as I told you before, what child objects does is it will take all the objects of the similar class name, that is web checkbox, and put it in a single object. And now what this line is doing is it is taking the count of the child objects, that is how many checkboxes this single object has, that is O child object contains a certain number of checkboxes. So this count will be put in the variable t, and we are printing the variable t in QTP's print log. So when I run this, let's see what happens. I'm just skipping, there's some Z which was okay, this Z was unknowingly typed, but our script worked. Okay, I'll run again. So when I run again and I look at my QTP's print log, you'll see that 5 is printed, so which means that this child object, O child object, this object has 5 objects which are belonging to the same class, that is web checkbox. So now we know the count. Now as you know, this object has the collection of the object of similar class. So how do we access each and every object inside it, that is each and every checkboxes? Okay, now I only have the collection, but what if I want a single particular checkbox from that collection, and I want to perform certain operations? Say for example I want the third checkbox and want to perform some operation on that. So how is it possible? So we use a concept of indexing in order to access these checkboxes, or for that matter any objects which are inside the child objects. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just remove this part of code. So instead of counting, what I'll do is I'll put a bracket and we'll use the indexing. The first object will start with index 0, that is the first web checkbox will have the index 0, second will have 1, third will have 2, 3, and the last one will have 4. This is how indexing works. It starts from 0 up to the number of objects. Now once we know the count of the objects, we suppose there are 100 checkboxes, it will go from 0 to 99. The beauty of this thing is even if the collection of the objects is changing dynamically for every session, for every time you log in, the number of checkboxes can vary dynamically from 0 to any number. But using .count method we can find the number of objects within the child object, and once we know the count, then we can perform the operation easily. And this indexing is used to access single objects every time. Okay, so when I'm using a 0 in the bracket and then the normal operation .set, whatever operation you perform on web checkbox on, so what this will do is this will set the 0th index web checkbox, that is the first web checkbox on this screen, on this page. So let's see what happens when we run. So we ran this and the first web checkbox is checked. And in similar manner, if you want to enter if you want to check the last checkbox, you can use 4. Now this is hard coding. Okay, generally I won't prefer doing hard coding because it is not a good practice. As you can see, the last checkbox, 5th checkbox has been checked. Now in order to avoid hard coding, what I'll do is, and you are aware of this, we have done this before, we'll just simply use a for loop. And I'll put this code inside the for loop. For will contain from high equal to. Now For descriptive programming, guys, what we did is we used 1 to 5, that is hard coding. Here what we can do is, since we know the count, we won't go for hard coding. We'll just simply put the count in some variable and then we will use that variable. Okay, so like we did, we put the count in t. We'll follow the coding standard. I'll use small I for integer and then count. So I count will have the count of the child objects which are in the collection. Once I have the count, since the index begins with 0, I'll go from I equal to 0 to I count minus 1. Now why minus 1? Because the count will have 5, but we are going from 0 to 4, and therefore it will be having, we won't use I count, we'll use I count minus 1 less than the actual count. And instead of using 4 here, I'll use I. So what this script will do is, first of all, it will take the count, that is 5, on this line number 16. It will take the count. I have count 5, so my script will the loop will run from 0 to 5 minus 1, that is 0 to 4. So the first value will be 0, and line number 19, which has indexing I, that is for the value of 0, it will check the first checkbox. Then for the next loop, the value of I will be 1 and I will take the value 1. Therefore the indexing will be 1 this time, and it will set the second checkbox. So and so on till the value of I reaches 4, that is the last checkbox. So let's remove the we'll keep it unchecked as the default setting and run the code. So as you can see, we have checked all the child objects which are in the collection. So this was the application of the child objects. Now, not necessary that we have to check all the checkboxes. Using indexing, you can check only the required checkboxes, okay, using this code. So this is what we do. The so the difference should be clear to you, that in descriptive programming we cannot apply descriptive programming for which the count of the child objects is varying dynamically. If the count is varying dynamically, I don't know what should be the value of the loop, the upper value of the loop. But in case of child objects, since it takes a collection of the similar object, we using dot count method we'll know the count of the child objects, even though it is varying dynamically. And once we know the count, we can use it in a for loop in order to perform operation on the child objects. So before moving forward, I'll show you some more application of child objects. Descriptive programming and object repositories were the two types which I had explained you, which will be used in coding. So based on your requirement, you are supposed to use either object repository or descriptive programming. And in descriptive programming, I had explained you about child objects concept and what is the application of child objects concept. Now this was one of the example of checking of the web checkbox, wherein we are performing operations on the similar child objects, that is child objects belonging to a particular class. And I'll show you another example wherein the child object concept is applicable.